A millionaire lived his life without imagining that something simple could change his view of the world. When he sees his maid teaching his son to play the piano, he feels an inexplicable curiosity. Upon discovering the reason behind this gesture, a wave of emotion takes hold of him. What he didn't know was that this revelation would make him revisit a tragedy from the past, stirring his deepest emotions. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment on where you are watching from. The sun was beginning to set over the Müller mansion, tinting the sky with orange hues that penetrated through the huge glass windows. Sophia Rossi, 39, had just finished cleaning the last room on the upper floor. Her rough fingers, marked by years of hard work as a maid, contrasted with the delicacy of the furniture she touched. As she put the cleaning products away in the small cupboard under the stairs, she heard a familiar sound that made her heart stop for a moment. Piano notes, clumsy and hesitant, echoed through the hallway. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling each note vibrate within her like a call from the past. Even out of tune, those notes brought back memories she had tried so hard to bury. For years, Sophia kept her secret hidden like a forbidden treasure. Before becoming a maid in the mansion of businessman Oliver Müller, she had been a promising pianist. "Elias, is that you?" she whispered to herself, recognizing the clumsy touch of the 10-year-old boy, her boss's son. Sophia followed the sound to the music room, a spacious room on the east side of the mansion where expensive instruments were displayed like trophies. Standing in the doorway, she watched the dark-haired boy fiddling with the keys, trying to reproduce a simple melody he had learned in his weekly lessons. "I can't do this right," the boy grumbled, banging the keys in frustration. Sophia hesitated at the entrance. For 15 years, ever since she had abandoned her dreams after successive rejections, she had not allowed herself more than brief glances at the instrument that had once been her life. Her mother, Donna Jensen, a woman with calloused hands and a practical outlook on life, had always discouraged her. "Music doesn't fill your stomach, Sophia. Stop daydreaming." The words echoed in her mind with the same clarity as when they were first spoken. "Can I help you, Elias?" The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. The boy turned around, surprised. Sophia rarely entered that room, limiting herself to cleaning the place quickly, always avoiding looking directly at the black grand piano that dominated the room. "Can you play, Sophia?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "A little," he replied modestly, approaching slowly like someone approaching an old love who still has the power to hurt. She sat down beside Elias on the wide piano bench, her heart racing. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling, as if they were about to touch a hot coal. Then, with a deep sigh, she let her fingers touch the cool ivory. The melody that emerged was like water breaking through a dam. Her fingers, even hardened from years of housework, glided with a grace that seemed impossible. It was a composition by Chopin, a nocturne that Sophia used to play back in her days at music college before everything fell apart. The sound filled the room and spread through the mansion's corridors, reaching the ears of Oliver Müller, who was working in his office. The 45-year-old businessman, a widower for 3 years, looked up from the documents he was analyzing, captivated by the unexpected beauty of the music. Elias watched Sophia with admiration, seeing for the first time that silent and discreet woman completely transform. There was a light in her eyes, a glow that the boy had never noticed before. "Sophia, that was amazing," he exclaimed when she finally stopped, pulling her hands away from the keyboard as if she had been caught red-handed. "You didn't say you knew a little. You play like a real pianist." Sophia smiled shyly, feeling her cheeks heat up. "It was a long time ago, Elias. I studied music in my youth." "Why didn't you ever tell me? You could teach me." The boy's enthusiasm was contagious, but Sophia felt the weight of the memories returning. "Some things we leave behind," she replied, nervously adjusting her apron. "Now I need to finish preparing dinner." She quickly got up, but when she turned to leave, she found Oliver standing in the doorway, watching her with a look that mixed surprise and something else, something she couldn't define. "I didn't know. I had a concert pianist working in my house," he commented with a half smile on his lips. Sophia felt her face burn with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to intrude on Elias's classes." Oliver entered the room, approaching the piano. There was something different in his gaze when he directed it at Sophia, as if he was seeing her for the first time. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, genuinely interested. Sophia hesitated. Talking about her past was like opening a door she had kept locked for years. "I studied at the Conservatory of Music for a few years." "And what happened?" The question, though simple, was like a dagger. What happened? There were the repeated no's, the looks of disdain, the coldness of the industry, the cruel comments from colleagues who had moved forward while she had fallen behind. There was her mother, sick, needing care and money that music could not provide quickly enough. There were shattered dreams and the harsh reality imposing itself on youthful aspirations. "Life, sir." "Life happened," he replied simply. That night, after serving dinner and retiring to her small room at the back of the mansion, Sophia allowed herself something rare, daydreaming. The piano playing that afternoon had awakened something dormant inside her, as if a long-buried seed had unexpectedly received water and light. Lying on her narrow bed, she remembered the years of studying, the competitions, the applause, the nights practicing until her fingers ached. She remembered Professor Hugo, who had believed in her when no one else did. Lena Novak, her former classmate who had become an internationally recognized pianist while Sophia cleaned strangers' houses. She thought of Marco Armani, the music producer who had closed the doors on her, with harsh words that still stung like open wounds. "You have technique, Sophia, but you lack soul. You lack that special something that separates the good from the extraordinary." A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Elias, in his pajamas, holding a crumpled sheet of music. "Sophia, can you help me with this tomorrow?" he asked, his eyes pleading. "I have a performance at school next week and I want to impress the music teacher." Sophia hesitated. Helping Elias meant returning to that piano, reviving that part of herself she had buried. It was dangerous, painful. "Elias, I work for your father. I have a lot of responsibilities here. I'm not your music teacher." The boy lowered his head in disappointment. "I see. It's just, when you played today, it felt like magic. I wish I could play like that too." Something inside Sophia stirred. The innocence of that request, the sparkle in the boy's eyes, reminded her of herself as a child when she had fallen in love with the piano at the age of 6, attending a concert with her father before he left, never to return. "Let me see that sheet music," he finally relented, holding out his hand. It was a simple piece, suitable for beginners. Sophia felt a warmth in her chest at the thought of teaching, of sharing that knowledge that she had kept to herself for so long. "We can try tomorrow after I finish my chores, but it'll be our secret, okay?" Elias's smile lit up his little face. "I promise. Thank you, Sophia." As the boy left, Sophia realized her heart was beating faster, not from fear or anxiety, but from an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A small spark of possibility was lit on her horizon after years of darkness. What she didn't know was that Oliver Müller, as he passed by the hallway, had heard part of that conversation, and his thoughts, at that moment, were already making plans that would change the course of Sophia's life forever. The following weeks passed at a new pace for Sophia. After finishing her household chores, she would meet with Elias in the music room, away from the curious eyes of the other employees of the mansion. What began as simple help with the school play soon turned into real piano lessons. Seeing the boy's progress gave Sophia a satisfaction she had not experienced in a long time. "Don't hold your shoulders so tight, Elias. Keep your hands relaxed, as if they were floating over the keys," she instructed, as the boy struggled to follow her instructions. On that particular afternoon, while Sophia was adjusting Elias's posture at the piano, she didn't notice that Oliver was watching the scene from the half-open door. The businessman noticed how his son, usually restless and uninterested in conventional lessons, dedicated himself wholeheartedly to Sophia's instructions. Even more intriguing was the transformation in the maid herself. The quiet and reserved woman he had known for 3 years seemed like a different person when she was in front of the piano. "I think it's time we stopped the clandestine rehearsal," Oliver said. finally entering the room with a smile that showed not disapproval but curiosity. Sophia jumped to her feet as if she had been caught in the act of crime. "Mr. Müller, I'm sorry, Dad!" Elias interrupted, excited. "Sophia is teaching me things that my school teacher can't even explain. Look at what I've learned." The boy turned to the piano and played a little piece with far more ease than Oliver had ever seen him do. When he had finished, he looked up at his father with eyes shining with pride. "Impressive," Oliver commented, coming closer. "You're a great teacher, Sophia." She looked down, embarrassed. "I appreciate it, sir, but I have no training to teach. I'm just sharing what little I know." Oliver sat down in a nearby armchair, watching her with growing interest. "The little you know seems quite substantial. Elias, could you leave us alone for a moment? I have something to discuss with Sophia." The boy reluctantly left, casting a worried glance at his makeshift teacher. Sophia remained standing, hands clasped nervously in front of her, bracing herself for a possible reprimand. "No need to be tense, I'm not angry," Oliver assured her, indicating for her to sit down. "In fact, I'm curious. Why is someone with your talent working as a maid?" The question, although asked without malice, touched on old wounds. Sophia sighed deeply before answering. "Not every talent finds its place in the world, Mr. Müller. I tried to pursue a career as a pianist for years, but doors closed one after another. My mother fell ill. I needed immediate money and stability. Music became a luxury I could no longer afford." Oliver listened intently, watching the emotions that crossed Sophia's face as she spoke. "Have you ever considered trying again?" Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "The music industry isn't kind to women in their late 40s who've been away from the stage for over a decade. Some dreams have an expiration date, sir." Oliver was silent for a few moments, as if processing this information. "Don't agree," he said finally. "Talent has no expiration date. Play something for me." Sophia's eyes widened, surprised by the request. "Now?" "Yes, now. Something you really love to play." She hesitantly approached the piano. She sat down on the bench, took a deep breath, and after a moment of concentration, her fingers began to dance across the keys. The piece she had chosen was not as complex or technically challenging as the one she had played on the first day. It was an original composition, something she had created years ago when she still believed it was possible to transform feelings into melodies that others could understand. The piece was melancholy, but with a thread of hope that grew as it progressed. When it ended, the silence that followed seemed charged with unspoken meaning. "Is it yours?" Oliver asked, visibly moved. Sophia nodded. "I wrote it many years ago. I called it Recomeço, at a time when I still believed in them." Oliver stood up and walked over to a small bookshelf nearby, where he pulled out a photo album. He leafed through it until he found what he was looking for, a photo of himself, much younger, sitting next to a piano, smiling at the camera. "I used to play too," he revealed, handing the photograph to Sophia. "Not with your talent, of course, but I had a deep passion for music. I dreamed of composing soundtracks for movies." "What happened?" asked Sophia, surprised by this revelation. "Life," he replied with a wry smile, returning her own words. "My father was building this empire and needed a successor. Responsibilities piled up, time became scarce, and one day I realized I hadn't played for years. Before I knew it, the piano had become just a decorative object in my house." Sophia felt an unexpected connection with her boss. They had both abandoned similar dreams, following paths imposed by circumstances beyond their control. "I have a proposal for you, Sophia," Oliver said suddenly. "Continue teaching Elias officially. We'll reduce your duties in the house and increase your salary to compensate. And if you're willing, I'd like you to help me make up some of what I've lost too. We can play together occasionally." The proposal was tempting, but Sophia hesitated. Allowing herself to return to music, even timidly, was opening a door to emotions that she had kept locked away for so long. "I don't know if that's a good idea, Mr. Müller. I'm your employee. It could complicate things." "Then don't be my maid anymore," he replied simply. "Be the music teacher at the Müller house. The change can be gradual so you won't feel pressured." Before Sophia could respond, the phone in her pocket vibrated. It was her mother, Mrs. Jensen. Excusing herself, she stepped away to answer it. "Hello, Mom? Sophia, I need you to send me more money this month. My blood pressure medication has increased and my pension isn't enough." Jensen's harsh voice sounded irritated as always. "Sure, Mom, I'll send more. How are you feeling?" "As always, what about you? Are you still wasting your life cleaning other people's houses? Or have you finally found a decent husband?" Sophia closed her eyes, holding back the pain those words always caused her. "I'm fine, Mom. Something interesting happened today. My boss offered me a job as a music teacher for his son." A heavy silence preceded Jensen's response. "Don't tell me you're back with that music nonsense, Sophia. Wasn't it enough that we wasted money on that course that led to nothing? You're no longer a girl to be chasing fantasies." Each word was like a blow, but this time, something inside. Sophia refused to bend completely. "I have to go now, Mum. We'll talk later." Ending the call, Sophia returned to where Oliver was waiting for her. There was a new determination in her eyes. "I accept your proposal, Mr. Müller, as a music teacher." "Excellent," Oliver smiled, extending his hand. "And please, considering these new circumstances, I think you can just call me Oliver." That night, alone in her room, Sophia opened the false bottom of her drawer and took out an old notebook of sheet music. They were her compositions written over the years, even when she didn't have a piano to play them on. She leafed through the yellowed pages, feeling the weight of interrupted dreams, of abandoned possibilities. She picked up a pencil and, for the first time in years, allowed herself to write a new melody. Something was being reborn inside her, fragile, hesitant but alive. At the same time, on the other side of the mansion, Oliver Müller was making some phone calls. His interest in Sophia went beyond the desire to provide music lessons for his son or to rediscover his own passion for the piano. He had recognized in her an extraordinary talent that did not deserve to remain in the shadows. "Andreas, this is Oliver Müller. Remember that favor you owe me? I need you to organize a small recital in your gallery. Yes, she's an unknown pianist, but I assure you she's worth hearing." Meanwhile, Elias, excited about the idea of having Sophia as his official teacher, was researching piano competitions for young talents on the computer. Unbeknownst to him, the actions of these three individuals were weaving a new reality, one that Sophia had never imagined would be possible again. In her modest apartment in the suburbs of Rio, Donna Jensen looked at an old photograph of a young Sophia smiling next to a piano, moments after winning her first youth competition. With a weary sigh, she put the photo away in the drawer. "Music doesn't fill your stomach," she repeated to herself, like a worn-out mantra that she could no longer fully believe. Sophia's transformation did not go unnoticed by the other staff at the Müller mansion. Within a few months, she had given up her duties as a maid to devote herself exclusively to giving piano lessons to Elias and occasionally musical sessions with Oliver. Her work uniform had given way to more elegant clothes, and her previously shy and downcast walk gradually became more confident. "Did you see the way the boss looks at her?" whispered Helena, the cook, to Luca, the gardener, as they watched Oliver and Sophia walking together through the garden, animatedly discussing classical composers. "Stop gossiping, Helena," Luca scolded, but he couldn't hide a knowing smile. "Although I've never seen Mr. Müller so light-hearted since his wife passed away." On that sunny Saturday morning, Sophia was adjusting the piano in the music room when she heard a notification on her cell phone. It was a message from Oliver. "I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. I have a surprise for you." Intrigued, Sophia finished what she was doing and headed to her office. Over the past few months, she had developed a growing relationship with Oliver. What had started as a musical partnership had evolved into long conversations about books, movies, and abandoned dreams. Sometimes, Sophia was surprised by the way he looked at her, a look that seemed to see beyond the maid she had always been in the eyes of others. "Come in," Oliver replied as she knocked softly on the door. The office was an elegant space, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and an imposing solid wood desk. Oliver was standing by the window, an envelope in his hands, and an enigmatic smile on his lips. "Did you want to see me?" "Yes, Sophia, I have something for you." He held out the envelope. "Open it." Carefully, she broke the seal and took out 2 golden tickets. Her eyes widened as she read the contents. "Gala concert at the Municipal Theatre with the Rio Philharmonic?" Her voice trembled slightly. "And that's tonight?" Oliver nodded, pleased with her reaction. "I thought we could go together. It's a chance to rekindle your passion for classical music, see other pianists, feel the energy of an audience appreciating the art you love." Sophia remained silent, looking at the tickets in her hands. It had been 15 years since she had set foot in the Municipal Theatre, since her last performance as a student at the conservatory. Returning to that place, now as a spectator, brought up contradictory feelings. "That's very kind, Oliver, but—" "Before you say no," he interrupted, stepping closer, "think about how therapeutic this could be. Facing a place that holds difficult memories, but now under different circumstances, with someone who admires your talent." Sophia felt her heart warm at those words. It was true that Oliver genuinely valued her musical ability, something few people had done throughout her life. And maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to confront that past that haunted her so much. "All right," he finally agreed. "I'll go with you." "Excellent. I'll pick you up at 7. Leaving the office, Sophia immediately went to look for Elias, who was practicing a new piece in the music room. The boy had become not only her student, but a true confidant. "Your father invited me to a concert at the Municipal Theatre," she said, still a little dazed. Elias gave a mischievous smile. "Is it like a date?" Sophia blushed deeply. "Of course not, it's just a cultural program between friends." "I know," the boy replied, with wisdom beyond his 10 years. "You'll need a pretty dress. The last one I saw you wearing was that faded blue one from Helena's birthday party." Sophia bit her lip, worried. He was right. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of practical and comfortable clothes, suitable for housework or teaching Elias. Nothing appropriate for a gala evening at the Municipal Theatre. "I guess I'll have to buy something new," he muttered, mentally calculating his savings. "Or—" Elias jumped up and grabbed her hand. "I have a better idea." The boy led her to a room at the end of the hall, which had remained untouched since the untimely departure of his mother, Elisa Müller, 3 years earlier. Reverently, he opened the spacious closet, revealing dozens of elegant dresses. "Elias, we can't—" Sophia hesitated, feeling like an intruder in that sacred space. "Mommy would like them to be worn," the boy said with conviction. She always said that beautiful clothes hold stories and deserve to continue to be a part of them. Reluctantly, Sophia approached the dresses. Elisa had been an elegant woman, known for her good taste. Her fingers lightly brushed against an emerald, green silk dress with a classic cut that seemed tailored for her. "This one," Elijah whispered as if reading her thoughts. "Mom wore this one to the last concert we attended together." Sophia's eyes welled up. There was something deeply symbolic about that moment, as if Elisa was somehow blessing her presence in Elias and Oliver's lives. "Are you sure about this, Elias? Won't your father be upset?" The boy shook his head. "I'm sure not. Dad always says we need to let the departed go in peace and move on with our lives." That evening, when Oliver knocked on the door of Sophia's small apartment in the coastal neighborhood, her insistence on preserving some independence even while working at the mansion, he was momentarily speechless. Sophia looked stunning in the emerald green dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her brown hair, usually pulled back in a simple bun, fell in soft waves over her shoulders. "You look—" Oliver searched for the right word. "Magnificent." Sophia felt her cheeks heat under his intense gaze. "Elias insisted that I wear one of Elisa's dresses. I hope you don't mind." An indefinable emotion crossed Oliver's face. "Not at all. Elisa would love to see her dresses appreciated again, and you do it justice." The drive to the Municipal Theatre was filled with light conversation about the evening's program. Pieces by Chopin, Liszt, and Tchaikovsky, performed by a young, rising Russian pianist. Sophia felt simultaneously nervous and excited, like a teenager on her first date. Even though it wasn't a date, she kept telling herself. The theatre was packed. Golden lights illuminated the neoclassical architecture, transporting those present to an era of refinement and elegance. Sophia took a deep breath as she climbed the marble steps, remembering the last time she had been here, not as a guest, but as a performer. "Are you okay?" Oliver asked, noticing her hesitation. "Yeah, just a lot of memories." He offered her his arm, a protective gesture that made her feel safe. "We're making new memories now." Their seats were excellent. Front row, with a perfect view of the grand piano in the center of the stage. As they waited for the concert to begin, Sophia watched the elegant audience settle in around her. Then her gaze met a familiar face that made her freeze. Marco Armani, the music producer who had crushed her dreams with cruel words 15 years ago, sat just a few rows back. He was grayer, but still had that arrogant air she had never forgotten. Beside him was Lena Novak, a former conservatory classmate who had become an internationally acclaimed pianist, a success Sophia might have achieved if circumstances had been different. Sophia. "What's wrong?" Oliver noticed her sudden paleness. "That man," she whispered, tilting her head slightly toward Marco. "He was the producer who told me I wasn't talented enough, and the woman next to him was my classmate at the conservatory." Oliver discreetly observed the two. "Do you want to leave? We can leave right now." The gentleness in his voice touched her deeply. "No," she said after a moment. "I won't run away. Not anymore." The lights in the theatre dimmed, and the concert began. At first, Sophia tried to focus on the music, but her mind kept returning to the presence of those people from her past. She felt Oliver's hand cover hers, a silent gesture of support that anchored her in the present. The young Russian pianist was truly exceptional, and Sophia gradually managed to lose herself in the beauty of his performances. During the intermission, however, the inevitable happened. Marco recognized her as she and Oliver walked through the foyer. "But look, Sophia Rossi," he exclaimed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Long time no see. Are you still playing the piano? Or have you finally found your true calling?" The condescending tone made Sophia's blood boil, but before she could respond, Lena approached. "Sophia, what a wonderful surprise!" Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, but there was something in her eyes that Sophia couldn't read. "I heard you had given up music." "I didn't give up," Sophia replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. "I just took a different path." Marco gave a short laugh. "Is that what they call it now? I distinctly remember telling you that I lacked that special something to be a true artist. Looks like I was right after all." Oliver, who had been watching in silence until then, stepped forward. "Oliver Müller," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I must say that I strongly disagree with your assessment. Sophia possesses an extraordinary gift." Marco raised his eyebrows, recognizing the name. "Müller of Müller Tech? Interesting. I didn't know you were a classical music connoisseur." "There are many things you don't know," Oliver replied with a polite smile that didn't completely hide the coldness in his gaze, "including how much you lost by underestimating Sophia's talent." An awkward silence fell, broken only when Lena lightly touched Sophia's arm. "We should grab coffee sometime. I'm sure we have a lot to talk about." Sophia nodded, though she doubted such a meeting would ever occur. "It would be interesting." When the lights flashed, signaling the end of the interval, Marco waved goodbye. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Sophia. Who knows, maybe one day you'll surprise me." With a smile that bordered on sarcasm, he added, "Although I doubt it." Back in her seat, Sophia felt strangely light. The confrontation she had feared so much had happened, and she had survived. More than that, for the first time in 15 years, she did not feel diminished by Marco's words. "Thank you," she whispered to Oliver, as the lights went out again. "For what?" "For standing up for me, for believing in me." In the dark, he found his hand. "I've done nothing but tell the truth." The second part of the concert unfolded as if in a dream. Sophia allowed herself to be transported by the music, letting each Note: wash away the old wounds that the encounter had reopened. When the pianist played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she used to play, she felt silent tears run down her face. They weren't tears of sadness or regret, she realized with surprise. They were tears of reconnection with a part of herself that had been dormant for so long. On the way back, Oliver suggested they stop for a late dinner at a small Italian restaurant. There, in a warm and intimate setting, Sophia finally opened up completely about her musical past, her hopes, her dreams, her disappointments. She spoke of her father, who had taken her to a concert for the first time before abandoning the family, of her mother, who had always seen music as a useless pastime, of the years of study and dedication that seemed to have been in vain. "It's never in vain when you love what you do," Oliver commented, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "And it's never too late to start over." At 40? In the world of classical music? Sophia shook her head, although something inside her desperately wanted to believe those words. Why not? You have talent, Sophia. Don't let the words of one man, no matter how influential, define your worth. That night marked a subtle but profound change in their relationship. As he dropped her off at home, Oliver held her hands for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," he said, his voice lower than usual. "It was special." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest. "It was special for me too." For a moment, it looked like he was going to lean in and kiss her, but the moment passed. With a gentle smile, Oliver said goodbye and headed back to his car. Inside her apartment, Sophia carefully removed Elisa's dress and hung it up reverently. In the silence of the night, she sat down at the small digital keyboard she kept hidden in a corner and for the first time in years allowed herself to play freely without fear or reservations. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Oliver was making an important call. "Andreas? We need to talk about that recital. I want it to be more than just a small event. I want it to be grand. Sophia Rossi deserves nothing less." Meanwhile, in his luxurious apartment, Marco Armani was researching Sophia Rossi's name on his computer, feeling strangely uneasy after the unexpected encounter. What he would discover would change the course of events in ways neither of them could have foreseen. The following weeks brought significant changes to Sophia's life. What had begun as simple piano lessons for Elias had evolved into something much bigger. Oliver, driven by an unshakable belief in her talent, had secretly arranged a small recital at the prestigious Andreas Draco Gallery, a space traditionally dedicated to the visual arts, but which occasionally opened its doors to intimate musical performances. A recital? Sophia nearly dropped her coffee cup when Oliver revealed his plans that Sunday morning. "You're kidding, right?" They were on the terrace of the mansion, enjoying breakfast while Elias played with his dog in the garden below. Oliver smiled, pleased with her reaction. "I've never been more serious. Andreas is an old friend, and he was enthusiastic when I told him about you. The event will be small, just 50 selected guests, critics, producers, classical music lovers." Sophia felt panic rise in her chest. 3 weeks from now? Oliver, I haven't played professionally in 15 years. Am I not prepared to perform in front of critics and producers? "You play beautifully every day here at home," he said, leaning forward with that intense gaze that always disarmed her. "Sophia, I've seen you help Elias prepare increasingly complex pieces. I've heard you play alone when you think no one is listening. Your talent hasn't diminished with time. In fact, it's deepened." His words touched her, but her fear was stronger. Years of insecurity didn't dissipate so easily. What if I fail? What if they laugh at me? What if Marco is there? What if you shine? What if they give you a standing ovation? What if this is the fresh start you deserve? Oliver took her shaking hands in his. "Sophia, I'm not asking you to do this for me. I'm asking you to do it for yourself." There was something in his gaze, a mixture of admiration and something deeper that Sophia didn't dare name, that kept her from refusing outright. "I'll think about it," he finally conceded. That afternoon, while she was tidying up her sheet music after a lesson with Elias, Sophia was surprised by the ringing of her cell phone. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Sophia Rossi, this is Lena Novak. We met at the Municipal Theatre a few weeks ago. Sophia felt her stomach sink. Why would her former colleague, now a famous pianist, be calling her? Yes, of course. How did you get my number? A soft laugh sounded on the other end of the line. The classical music world is small and I have good connections. Would you like to meet for coffee? I have a proposal that might interest you. Intrigued and apprehensive, Sophia agreed. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Leblon the next day. When she hung up, her mind was buzzing with possibilities. What kind of proposal could Lena have for someone who had abandoned her career so long ago? Café Vienna was the kind of elegant establishment that Sophia rarely frequented. When she arrived, Lena was already waiting for her, impeccably dressed in a beige linen suit, with that air of European sophistication that had always characterized her, even in her conservatory days. "Sophia," he exclaimed, standing up for a warm hug that took Sophia by surprise. "How wonderful to see you again. You look great." The initial pleasantries gave way to a conversation about old times, about colleagues who had gone on to careers and others who, like Sophia, had chosen different paths. Lena spoke enthusiastically about her international tours, her concerts with renowned orchestras, her award-winning recordings. "But you know, Sophia," she said finally, after a long sip of her cappuccino, "I always felt like there was something missing in my career." "What? You have everything we dreamed of back in the conservatory." Lena smiled, a melancholy smile that didn't match her successful image. "I have recognition, acclaim, lucrative contracts, but I lost something along the way, the true passion for music. Everything has become so mechanical, so commercial." Sophia didn't know what to say. She had never imagined that someone like Lena, who seemed to have achieved everything, could feel this way. "Marco and I are producing a new project," Lena continued, leaning forward as if sharing a secret. "A collaborative album called Percursos, bringing together pianists with unconventional backgrounds, people who bring a unique perspective to classical piano. And what does that have to do with me? We want you, Sophia. Your story, your sensitivity, that special touch that I always admired, even when we competed at the conservatory." Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. "Wait, you're inviting me to record an album? After 15 years away from the stage? And Marco agreed to this?" Lena laughed, a clear sound that drew glances from the neighboring tables. "Actually, it was his idea." "Marco? Armani? The same man who told me I didn't have what it took to be a true artist?" "People change, Sophia. After seeing you at the theatre, something struck him. He researched you, found old recordings of your performances at the conservatory. He became obsessed, I would say." Sophia shook her head in disbelief. None of this made sense. "Why now? Why me?" "Because you represent something authentic in the artificial world we live in. Because your music has soul, Sophia. It always has." Lena paused, taking another sip of her cappuccino before adding, "And I also won't deny that your connection with Oliver Müller piqued Marco's interest. He's always had a knack for spotting business opportunities." There it was, the real reason behind the sudden interest. Oliver Müller, the powerful businessman who ran a technology empire. Sophia felt a bitter taste in her mouth. "So that's it. Marco thinks he can use me to get to Oliver." "Don't be unfair. Yes, the connection with Müller is a bonus, but the invitation is genuine. Listen, Sophia, I understand your hesitation. Marco hasn't been kind to you in the past, but this is a real opportunity to return to music on your own terms." Sophia was silent, absorbing his words. 2 weeks ago, the idea of playing professionally again had seemed like an impossible dream. Now, not only did she have the recital, organized by Oliver, but she also had this unexpected invitation from her former enemies. "I need to think," he said finally, standing up. "Thanks for the coffee, Lena." "Sure, no rush, but don't wait too long. The project is already underway and we need to define the participants soon." On the way back to the Müller mansion, Sophia felt torn between conflicting emotions. Part of her was suspicious of Marco's intentions, but another part, the one that had never stopped dreaming of the stage, pulsed with renewed hope. When he arrived, he found the house unusually quiet. Luca, the gardener, came to meet him with a worried expression. "Sophia, I'm glad you're back. Little Elias has had a high fever since early morning. Mr. Muller is with him in the room." Without thinking twice, Sophia ran upstairs. She found Oliver, sitting on the edge of her son's bed, applying a cold compress to his forehead. "Sophia," Elias murmured, his voice weak and his eyes feverish. "I promised I would practice the sonata today, but I'm so tired." She walked over, sitting on the other side of the bed and taking the boy's small warm hand in hers. "Don't worry about that now, you just need to rest and get better." Oliver looked exhausted and worried. "The fever won't go down. The doctor said it's a virus and we need to control the temperature." "Have you tried a warm bath?" Sophia suggested, touching Elias's burning forehead. "Sometimes it helps bring down the fever faster than compresses." Oliver hesitated. "He's so weak. I don't know if he can stand up in the shower." "We can help him together. You hold him while I help him cool." Off. There was a domestic intimacy to the scene, the two of them caring for Elias as if they were a real family. Sophia drew the bath at the perfect temperature while Oliver carried his son into the bathroom. They worked in coordinated silence, as if they had been doing this together for years. After the bath, with Elias wearing clean pajamas and sleeping more peacefully, Oliver and Sophia retired to the hallway. "Thank you," he said, looking vulnerable in a way she rarely saw him. "I don't know what I would do without you. It's just a fever, Oliver. Kids get sick all the time." "It's not just that." He ran a hand through his hair wearily. "Since Elisa left, I've been trying to be both a mother and a father to Elias. But there are times when I realize how much he misses a female presence, someone who has that intuition that, well, that you have." Sophia felt her heart ache at those words. In the last few months she had developed a genuine affection for Elias, a protective instinct that went beyond the teacher-student relationship. "He's a special boy," he replied, simply. Oliver looked at her intently. "Just like you are a special woman, Sophia." There was something about that look, about that moment shared in the silent hallway, that seemed about to change everything between them. Sophia felt her heart race as Oliver took a step toward her, closing the distance between them. But before anything could happen, her cell phone rang, breaking the spell of the moment. It was her, Mother. "I have to get this," he muttered, taking a few steps away. Oliver nodded, a shadow of disappointment crossing his face. "Sure. I'll stay with Elias." Sophia headed to the balcony at the end of the hallway to answer the call, knowing it wouldn't be an easy conversation. "Hello, Mum?" "Sophia, finally." Mrs. Jensen's voice sounded more irritated than usual. "I've been trying to reach you for days. This month's money hasn't arrived yet and I've run out of medicine." "Sorry, Mom. I transferred it last night. It should be in your account today." "Humph. And what do I owe this distraction to? Are you still wasting time on that piano instead of looking for a real job?" Sophia took a deep breath. After all these years, it still hurt to hear her mother's dismissive treatment of her passion. "Actually, I'm giving music lessons to Mr. Muller's son, and I have news. I've been invited to give a recital at the Andreas Draco Gallery in 3 weeks. A tense silence followed before Jensen replied, "So that's it? Are you going back to that life of uncertainty? Wasn't it enough that you failed the first time?" "It wasn't a failure, Mom, and I'm not quitting my job at the E. Miller Mansion. It's just a performance. A presentation today, and tomorrow there you are again in that unstable life, not knowing if you will have enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month. Sophia, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop chasing childish dreams?" Sophia felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to cry. "Not anymore. I have to go now, Mom. Elias is sick and I need to help take care of him." "Oh, so you're a nurse now too? Or are you trying to become the new lady of the house? Is that it, Sophia? Are you eyeing the widowed boss?" The words hit Sophia like a slap. "It's nothing like that, Mom. Please stop. I'm just trying to protect you, daughter. People like us don't belong in that world. The sooner you accept that, the less you'll suffer." After the call ended, Sophia stood motionless on the balcony, staring out at the city below. The lights were beginning to flicker on in the twilight, tiny dots of brightness that resembled musical notes scattered across a giant sheet of music. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, mingling with Lena's proposal and Oliver's invitation to the recital. "Are you okay?" Oliver's voice made her turn. He had approached silently and was now watching her with concern. "Yeah, just family stuff." Sophia forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How's Elias?" "His fever has gone down a bit. He's sleeping." Oliver leaned against the railing beside her, looking out over the city as well. "You know, I've always liked this time of day. The time when the day isn't completely over and the night hasn't yet begun. A break between two realities." Sophia nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. "That's exactly how I feel right now. Between two lives." "Because of the recital?" "Not only that." She hesitated, unsure whether to share Lena and Marco's proposal. Finally, she decided to be honest. "I got an invitation today. Lena Novak and Marco Armani are producing an album with pianists from unconventional backgrounds. They want me to be a part of it." Oliver raised his eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "That's unexpected, especially coming from Marco after what you told me about him." "I thought it was weird too. Lena let it slip that part of their interest had to do with my connection to you." A flash of understanding crossed Oliver's face. "Oh, right. Marco has always been an opportunist. He's probably interested in some partnership with Muller Tech." "That's what I thought. But Lena insisted that the invitation to participate in the album was genuine." Oliver was silent for a few moments, contemplating the situation. "What do you want to do, Sophia?" It was a simple question, but one no one had asked her in a long time. What did she want? Not what her mother expected, not what Marco planned, not what Oliver desired, but what she, Sophia Rossi, truly wanted. "I don't know for sure," he admitted. "Part of me is suspicious of Marco's intentions. Another part of me wants to believe that this is a legitimate second chance. And a third are terrified of ever stepping onto a stage again," Oliver added with a knowing smile. Sophia couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. "Exactly. Sophia, whatever you decide about the album, I hope you'll agree to do the recital. Not for me or anyone else, but for yourself. To prove to yourself that that young pianist full of dreams still exists." There was something in the way he spoke, a mixture of affection and respect that touched Sophia deeply. It was as if Oliver saw in her not only the person she was now, but also all the possibilities she could yet become. "You really believe?" "Me, don't you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "More than you believe." He turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. "And it's not just your musical talent that I believe in, Sophia. It's you, everything you are." The moment had an almost magical quality, as if time had stopped flowing. Sophia felt her heart pound as Oliver leaned toward her, slowly closing the distance between them. This time, without interruption, his lips met hers in a soft kiss, tentative at first, like a silent question. When she responded, the kiss deepened, bringing out feelings that Sophia hadn't known she was still capable of experiencing. As they walked away, they both seemed equally surprised by what had happened. It was Oliver who broke the silence first. "Sorry. If I overstepped any boundaries, "No," Sophia interrupted, smiling shyly. "It didn't." The moment of intimacy was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. It was Helena, the cook, with a worried expression. "Mr. Muller, there's a man at the door. He said he urgently needs to speak to Sophia, a guy named Marco Armani." The main hall of the Muller mansion, usually a space of tranquility and understated elegance, now seemed too small to contain the tension emanating from the three adults seated in their respective places. Oliver, standing by the fireplace, maintained a neutral expression that only partially masked his annoyance. Sophia, sitting on the edge of an armchair, as if ready to get up at any moment, nervously twisted her fingers in her lap. And Marco Armani, settled on the sofa with the confidence of someone who feels perfectly at ease even in hostile territory, slowly sipped the whiskey offered out of pure courtesy. "I must say, Mr. Muller, that your home is even more impressive than I imagined. A true testament to your good taste." Marco's comment was laced with that condescending tone that Sophia knew so well. "Thank you," Oliver replied dryly. Although I have to admit I'm intrigued by this unexpected visit, especially considering Lena had just presented her proposal to Sophia this afternoon. Marco smiled, a calculated smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ah yes, Lena is wonderful, but sometimes she lacks the personal touch. I felt it was important to come myself, explain the nuances of the project, make sure Sophia understands how seriously we take her talent. Sophia watched the producer with growing suspicion. In his nearly 15-year career in the music industry, Marco Armani had never shown this kind of deference to new or returning artists. He was known for being ruthless, pragmatic, and completely focused on the commercial potential of the people he worked with. Really? Sophia couldn't help but sound skeptical. Because the last time we talked about my talent, you made it very clear that I didn't have that special something. Marco had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. People evolve, Sophia, artists mature, and critics like me, well, sometimes we get it wrong. He set his glass down on the coffee table and leaned forward. I listened to some of your old recordings recently. There was something there, something genuine, authentic, something the market values more now than it did 15 years ago. Oliver let out a sound that could have been interpreted as either a stifled laugh or a snort of disbelief. Fascinating how the market always seems to value exactly what is commercially advantageous at the moment. Marco turned to the businessman with a forced smile. Cynicism doesn't suit you, Müller. I understand that you yourself are organizing a recital for Sophia at the Andreas Draco Gallery. He turned back to Sophia. An admirable initiative. No doubt. But let me ask, what next? A recital for 50 select guests and then what? Back to piano lessons for young Elias? Sophia felt her face heat up. Marco had a gift for finding exactly the sensitive spots, the insecurities she tried to ignore. What I'm offering, he continued, is a real platform, a professional album distributed internationally, interviews, maybe a small tour, a real second chance. In exchange for... Oliver asked, crossing his arms. Marco raised his eyebrows. In exchange for her participation in the project, obviously, Sophia would receive a fair fee, royalties on her compositions. What about Oliver? Sophia interrupted. What exactly is your interest in him? A brief silence followed the direct question. Marco adjusted his posture, visibly reconsidering his approach. I won't deny that having the support of someone like Oliver Müller would be a significant bonus for the project. Müller Tech is known for its patronage of the arts, and a formal partnership could benefit both parties. So that's it, Oliver concluded, approaching the two armchairs. You want to use Sophia as a bridge to get to my company? That's a gross oversimplification, Müller. Marco straightened, partially abandoning his conciliatory tone. Sophia has a legitimate talent that I want to promote. The fact that she also has valuable connections is just synergistic. Sophia stood up abruptly. The conversation was suffocating her, bringing back all the old insecurities, all the doubts about her worth as an artist versus her worth as a springboard for other people's ambitions. I need to check on Elias, she murmured, heading for the door. Sophia, wait. Marco's voice stopped her. You don't have to decide now, but think about it. This recital that Müller is organizing is a beautiful gesture, it really is. But how many recitals have you done that have led to nothing? How many times have you played with your heart in your mouth only to go home with no real prospects? The words hit home with brutal precision. Sophia left the room without answering, feeling once again like that young pianist desperate for an opportunity, willing to accept crumbs of recognition from people like Marco. He went upstairs to Elias's room, finding him still asleep, his breathing more regular, his face less flushed. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching the boy who, without realizing it, had reintroduced music into his life in such a significant way. What would you do, Elijah? He whispered, knowing he would get no answer. Would you follow your heart or your head? A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Oliver. Our guest is gone, he informed, approaching. How is our patient? Better, I believe. The fever seems to have broken. Oliver sat beside her on their son's bed, the mattress sinking slightly under his weight. For a few moments they just watched the child in silence, bonded by a shared affection. About Marco, Oliver began hesitantly. I don't want to talk about him right now, Sophia interrupted softly. Actually, I think I need some time to process all of this. The last few weeks have been intense. The recital, Marco and Lena's invitation, the two of us. Oliver nodded understandingly. Of course, it's all happening so quickly. He lightly touched her hand. I just want you to know that no matter what you decide about Marco's project, the gallery recital is yours. No strings attached, no expectations, just a stage for you to rediscover your own voice. Sophia felt a wave of gratitude for this man who in such a short time had become such a positive force in her life. Thank you, Oliver, for everything. He smiled, that sincere smile that always took her breath away. We'd better let Elias rest. You should get some rest too. As they left the room, Sophia announced her decision. I'm going to my apartment tonight. I need some space to think. Oliver looked slightly disappointed but didn't protest. Sure, I'll ask the driver to take you. As she walked back to her modest apartment, Sophia reflected on the dizzying roller coaster ride her life had become. Just a few months ago, she was just a maid with a musical past buried somewhere deep in her soul. Now, she was once again faced with choices that could completely change her future. When she walked into her apartment, the first thing she noticed was the small digital keyboard in the corner of the living room. Purchased years ago as a rare indulgence when she had finally managed to save up enough money, the instrument had served more as a reminder than a practice tool. Now, however, Sophia felt an irresistible urge to play. He sat down on the bench, turned on the keyboard, and let his fingers run over the keys without conscious plan. A melody began to take shape. Something new, not one of the classical pieces he had taught Elias, but a composition of his own that seemed to spring directly from his conflicting emotions. She was so absorbed in the music that she almost didn't hear the doorbell. Abruptly interrupting the melody, she went to answer the door, surprised to find Lena Novak on the other side. Can I come in? The pianist asked, looking strangely vulnerable, quite unlike the confident woman in the cafe. Sophia hesitated only for a moment before stepping aside. How did you know where I live? The same contacts who gave me your phone number, Lena replied with a half smile as she took in the simple but cozy apartment. I heard you playing. Was it an original composition? Sophia nodded awkwardly. Just something I was working on. Nothing serious. It sounded pretty serious to me. Lena walked over to the keyboard, running her fingers lightly over the keys without making a sound. Marco visited you, didn't he? Yes. How did you know? Because I've known Marco for years. He doesn't trust anyone to do a better job than he does. Lena sighed, sitting down on the small couch. I came because I want you to know something Marco probably didn't mention. It was my idea to include you in the project, not his. Sophia crossed her arms defensively. Why? We've barely spoken since our conservatory days. Lena seemed to choose her next words carefully. Because I've never forgotten how you played, Sophia. There was a truth to your music that I could never quite match, no. Matter how many awards you won or how many records you sold. She paused, a sad smile playing on her lips. I guess in a way, I always envied that about you. The confession caught Sophia completely off guard. Lena Novak, the child prodigy, who had become an international star, was jealous of her? You're kidding, right? You have everything I ever dreamed of. I have the career you dreamed of, Lena corrected. But I lost something along the way, Sophia. I lost that pure connection to music. It became all about contracts, expectations, public image. When I heard you play at the conservatory all those years ago, there was an authenticity that moved me. It was like you disappeared and only the music existed. Sophia sat down in a nearby chair, trying to absorb this surprising revelation. So why work with Marco on this project? He represents exactly that commercial side of the industry that you say has lost its connection with music. Because, despite everything, Marco is still the best at what he does. And this project is different. It's a chance to rediscover that lost connection, to work with artists who haven't yet been corrupted by the system. Lena leaned forward, looking Sophia straight in the eye. And also because, to be honest, part of me wants to right a wrong from the past. What mistake? Marco wasn't the only one who doubted your talent, Sophia. Lena's voice shook slightly. I played dirty too. I badmouthed you to influential people, spread rumors about your lack of commitment. I was afraid of you, of your authenticity, of your natural gift that I had to work so hard to emulate. Sophia felt as if the ground had dropped out from under her feet. All those closed doors, all those denied opportunities, they had been the result not only of Marco's negative assessment, but also of a deliberate campaign of sabotage by someone she considered, if not a friend, then at least a respected colleague. Why? Are you telling me this now? He finally managed to ask, his voice rough with pent-up emotion. Because I'm tired of living with this guilt. Because when I saw you in that theater, after all these years, I realized how much my petty jealousy had cost a genuine artist. Lena paused, swallowing hard. And because, selfishly, I want a chance to redeem myself, to finally do something right with my career, to help bring back a voice that should never have been silenced. The silence that followed was thick, laden with 15 years of untold stories, divergent paths, old pains and new revelations. Sophia felt simultaneously betrayed and strangely liberated, as if a mystery that had tormented her for years had finally found an explanation. I need you to know, Lena continued, that despite Marco's commercial intentions, my invitation is genuine. I want you to be part of this project because I believe in your talent, Sophia. I always have, even when I was working against it. Sophia walked to the window, watching the night falling over Rio. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She felt anger, confusion, but also a strange gratitude for finally understanding at least part of what had happened in her past. I don't know what to say, Lena. It's a lot to process at once. I understand. I don't expect an answer right now. Lena stood up, grabbing her bag. Just think about the project on its own merits. And know that regardless of your decision, I'm truly happy that you're finding your way back to music. When Lena was already at the door, Sophia called her. Are you going to be at the recital? At the Andreas Draco Gallery? The pianist turned, a genuine smile lighting her face for the first time since she had arrived. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Alone again, Sophia returned to the keyboard, but this time she could not play. The revelations of the night had stirred her emotions deeply, bringing back painful memories, but also opening new perspectives on her past and future. His phone rang. It was Oliver. Just calling to see if you arrived safely, he said, his voice conveying genuine concern. Yes, I'm fine. Sophia hesitated, then decided to share. Lena was here. Lena Novak? In your apartment? What did she want? Sophia sighed. It's a long story. Can I tell you tomorrow? Of course. A pause. Sophia, I know you need space, but I want you to know that what happened tonight in the hallway. I know, she interrupted softly. I've been thinking about it too. But I need to get my head together first. I understand. Rest well. After hanging up, Sophia pulled out an old scrapbook she kept in the back of her closet. She flipped through the yellowed pages, looking at reviews of her early recitals, photos from competitions, programs from her conservatory performances. On one of the last pages, she found an old photo of her and Lena, both in their early 20s, smiling after a joint performance. They looked so young, so full of hope and ambition. Closing the album, Sophia made a decision. It didn't matter what had happened in the past. Betrayals, disappointments, missed opportunities. What mattered was the present and the future she could still build. She took out her notebook of music and began to write a new composition, inspired by all the turbulent emotions she felt. He called it A New Beginning in D minor, a piece that spoke not only of loss and regret, but also of redemption and second chances, a piece that would play at the recital no matter what he decided about Marco and Lena's project. The next morning, when Sophia returned to the Müller mansion, she had a new determination. She found Elias already recovered, playing happily in the garden under Oliver's watchful eye. "Sophia!" the boy shouted when he saw her, running towards her. "I missed you. I'm much better today. Can we have our class?" "Of course," she replied, smiling and ruffling the boy's hair. "I can't wait to hear how the sonata turns out." As Elias ran back to get something he wanted to show her, Oliver approached. "You look different today," he observed. Sophia smiled. "I feel different. Lighter, somehow. Like I'm finally allowed to let go of the past and focus on what's ahead." "And what lies ahead?" Sophia took his hand, a gesture of intimacy that surprised them both. First a recital. Then, well, I'm still deciding the rest. The smile Oliver gave her was like a ray of sunshine after a long storm, bright, warm, and full of promise for the days to come. The Andreas Draco Gallery glowed under carefully designed lighting that highlighted both the artwork on the walls and the magnificent Steinway grand piano positioned in the center of the main space. It was only an hour before the concert was due to begin, and Sophia could barely contain the trembling in her hands as she adjusted the score for Recomeço em D minor, Restart in D minor, her original composition that would close the performance for the third time. "The piano is perfectly tuned," assured Andreas, the gallery owner and an old friend of Oliver's. "I'm sure you'll charm everyone tonight." Sophia forced a smile, trying to calm the anxiety rising in her chest. 15 years had passed since her last formal performance, and although she had practiced tirelessly for the past 3 weeks, she felt vulnerable as a beginner. "Sophia," Oliver's voice caught her attention. He had just arrived, looking impeccable in a dark suit that highlighted his imposing figure. "I brought someone who was eager to see you before the presentation." Elias appeared at his father's side, holding a bouquet of white roses that seemed almost larger than himself. He was wearing a small suit, clearly bought especially for the occasion, and his face was beaming with a smile. "These are for you," the boy said, holding out the flowers. "Daddy said it's tradition to give flowers to artists before big performances." Sophia felt her heart melt at the gesture. She bent down to receive the bouquet and hugged Elias tightly. "They're beautiful, thank you. You've brought me luck." "You don't need luck," the boy said, with the unshakable confidence of childhood. "You're the best pianist in the world." Oliver watched the scene with a tender smile. In the past few weeks after Lena's surprising visit and the revelations that accompanied it, he had become a constant pillar of support for Sophia. Respecting her request for space, he hadn't pressed her for a definition of what had happened between them that night in the hallway, but his attentive presence and his small daily kindnesses made clear the depth of his feelings. "How are you feeling?" he asked as Elias stepped back to examine the piano closely. "Terrified," Sophia admitted with a nervous laugh, "but also alive. More alive than I've felt in years." The look Oliver gave her was full of admiration. "You're going to shine tonight. I'm absolutely sure of it. Even if I miss every note, even if you played just one note, it would be the most beautiful ever heard in this gallery." A clearing of the throat interrupted the moment. It was Andreas, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry to interrupt, but the guest will start arriving soon. Sophia, we have a makeshift dressing room in the back where you can get ready." "I'll let you concentrate," Oliver said, giving her hand a light squeeze before walking away. The small dressing room. Sophia contemplated her reflection in the mirror as she applied a light touch-up to her makeup. She was wearing an elegant midnight blue dress, chosen with Elias's help from among Elisa's belongings. Oliver's late wife had been a woman of similar stature to her, and the clothes fit her perfectly, as if they were meant for her. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he replied, expecting to see Oliver or Andreas. To her surprise, it was her mother, Mrs. Jensen, who walked in. The woman, now in her 70s, seemed smaller and more fragile than Sophia remembered. But her eyes retained that characteristic hardness that had always intimidated her. "Mother," exclaimed Sophia, standing up, "I didn't know you were coming." "That rich boss of yours sent a car to pick me up," Jensen replied, looking critically, "at the dressing room and then at his daughter. He said you wished I was here." Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for Oliver, followed immediately by apprehension. Her mother had never supported her musical career, always considering it an irresponsible whim. What would she say now, seeing her about to dive back into that world? "I'm glad you came," Sophia said uncertainly. Jensen adjusted the worn bag he was carrying, clearly uncomfortable in the elegant surroundings. "So that's it? Are you really getting back into music?" "It's just a recital, Mom. It doesn't mean I'm giving up on everything." The lady sighed wearily. "I found this when I was tidying up that old trunk in the closet." She held out a yellowed envelope to Sophia. "I thought you might want to see it." Intrigued, Sophia opened the envelope. Inside, she found an old photograph, faded by time. Herself, about 6 years old, sitting at the piano in the church in the neighborhood where they grew up, next to her father. They were both smiling for the camera, their hands positioned identically on the keys. "Do you remember that day?" Jensen asked, his voice suddenly softer. "It was the first time your father took you to play on that old piano at church. You could barely reach the pedals, but you were already playing better than the organist." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. Her father, a kind but fragile man, had left when she was only 8 years old, leaving her with a bitter mother and a passion for music that he had encouraged from an early age. "I thought you threw away all his pictures after he left," Sophia whispered. "I tried," Jensen admitted. "But this always seemed too important." She paused, as if gathering her courage. "He would be proud of you today, Sophia." The words struck Sophia like a thunderbolt, breaking down emotional barriers she had built up over decades. Had her mother, who had always seemed to despise her music, held on to this precious memory all these years? "Mum, I always thought you hated watching me play because it reminded you of him." Jensen looked away, a rare gesture of vulnerability. "It wasn't quite like that. I was afraid, Sophia, afraid that you would suffer the same disappointments he did. Your father was talented like you know, but his talent wasn't enough to save him from disillusionment, from rejection. And when he left," and his voice trailed off momentarily, "when he left, I swore I wouldn't let you follow the same path." Sophia had never imagined that her mother, with her rigidity and pragmatism, could have acted out of fear and protection, even if mistakenly. The revelation was like a crucial piece of a puzzle that finally fit together, giving new meaning to her entire story. "He didn't leave because he failed at music, Mum," Sophia said gently. "He left because he had his own demons. Music was the only thing that kept him grounded for so long." Jensen nodded slowly, as if finally allowing this truth into his consciousness. "Maybe you're right. Anyway, I came today because maybe it's time I stopped being afraid of what you might lose and started being proud of what you've achieved." The two women stared at each other for a long moment, decades of misunderstanding and resentment silently acknowledged and, if not, completely resolved, at least honestly confronted for the first time. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was Andreas announcing that the guests had arrived and the presentation would begin in 15 minutes. "I'll find my place," Jensen said, heading for the door. Before he left, however, he turned one last time. "Sophia, play for him today." 2. With these words, he left the dressing room, leaving Sophia immersed in emotions that not even her most complex compositions could fully express. Outside, the gallery had been transformed. What had once been a large echoing space was now filled with about 60 people, more than the 50 originally planned. Oliver had used his influence to attract important figures from the classical music world, as well as personal friends and admirers of the arts. Among those present, Sophia recognized faces she had not seen for years, former colleagues from the conservatory, retired professors, and yes, as promised, Lena Novak, elegant in a discreet red ensemble. To her surprise, Marco Armani was also there, carefully observing every detail with calculating eyes. The atmosphere was one of refined anticipation, with champagne glasses circulating and conversations kept respectfully low. Oliver moved among the guests with the ease of a natural host, introducing people, facilitating connections, while Elias remained faithfully by his side, occasionally adjusting the bow tie that seemed to be bothering him. When Sophia finally emerged from the dressing room, a gradual hush fell over the room. She walked to the piano with a mixture of terror and determination, aware of the eyes following her. As she passed Oliver and Elias in the front row, they gave her identical smiles of encouragement. Her mother sat stiffly a few seats away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. As she sat before the magnificent Steinway, Sophia allowed herself a moment to absorb the reality of the moment. 15 years of self-imposed silence, of abandoned dreams, of unrealized potential, all culminating in this precise moment. His first notes were hesitant, almost timid, a Chopin prelude, chosen deliberately for its comforting familiarity. Gradually, though, as his fingers rediscovered the joy of movement over the keys, the music gained confidence, depth, a life of its own. From Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata to a moving interpretation by Villa-Lobos, Sophia took her audience through a carefully planned musical journey, each piece selected not only for its artistic value, but for the personal meaning it held in her story. As she played, a subtle transformation took place. The insecure Sophia, scarred by years of doubt and regret, gave way to a confident artist who expressed herself with passion and authenticity through music. Her entire body seemed to breathe with the melodies, moving in perfect synchrony with the emotions each composition evoked. The audience, initially polite and restrained, gradually succumbed to the enchantment. Even the most experienced critics, who had come more out of courtesy to Oliver Müller than out of genuine interest in an unknown pianist, were rapt, many with expressions of barely concealed surprise. Marco Armani, sitting near the back of the gay room, could not hide his calculating expression. Here was the talent he had prematurely discarded, blossoming despite his rejection. His mind was already racing with possibilities for capitalizing on this unexpected rediscovery. Lena, on the other hand, watched her former rival with a mixture of genuine admiration and melancholy. There was a purity to Sophia's performance that she, with all her refined technique and international experience, had never been able to achieve. It was as if Sophia not only played the music, but became part of it, a conduit for something greater that transcended mere technical execution. When it was time for the final piece, her own composition, Recomeço em Dó menor, Sophia paused briefly. She looked out at the audience, meeting the eyes of her mother, Elias, and finally Oliver. Without formal announcement, she let her fingers begin the delicate introduction to the piece that had grown out of her recent experiences, her past pains, and her reborn hopes. The composition began melancholy, with minor chords that evoked loss and regret, gradually evolving into a central section of struggle and determination to finally emerge in a bright and hopeful conclusion, although not without nuances of nostalgia. It was the story of his life, translated into music. As the last note dissolved into the silence of the gallery, Sophia remained motionless for a few seconds, her eyes closed, her hands still hovering over the keys, as if reluctant to break the connection with the moment. The silence that followed was brief but profound, that suspended moment of awe before a truly moved audience reacts. Then, like a wave breaking on a shore, the applause began, at first timid, then growing in intensity until it became a standing ovation. Sophia opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the enthusiastic response. She saw Elias jumping up and down and applauding wildly, her mother still seated but with silent tears streaming down her wrinkled face, Lena Novak standing with a smile of genuine admiration, and Oliver, his eyes reflecting such deep pride and such evident love that it almost made her look away. As she stood to give thanks, her legs felt shaky with the rush of adrenaline. The weeks of anxiety, the years of doubt, the moments of despair, they all seemed now part of a necessary journey that had led her to this very moment of redemption. The reception that followed was a whirlwind of greetings, business cards exchanged, proposals whispered. Critics whom Sophia recognized from respected publications praised her performance. Former teachers expressed pride. Even colleagues who had once looked down on her now seemed eager to reminisce about old connections. "I knew. You'd rock it," Elias said, hugging her tightly as he finally managed to get close to her among the admirers. Everyone's saying it was amazing. Thank you for being here with me, Sophia replied, genuinely touched by the boy's unconditional support. Donna Jensen approached next, looking out of place among so many elegant people, but with a sparkle in her eyes that Sophia hadn't seen since childhood. Your father would be proud, she repeated softly, and she hesitated, the words difficult for a woman who rarely expressed positive emotions. I'm proud too, daughter. Before Sophia could respond, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Marco Armani, with his perfectly calculated business smile, was approaching with determination. Sophia, what an extraordinary presentation. Exactly the kind of authenticity we're looking for in our Pathways project. We need to talk about next steps, perhaps tomorrow in my office? Sophia felt a stab of irritation at Marco's presumption, at the way he simply assumed she would be eager for his approval after years of rejection. Actually, Marco, he replied calmly, I'm still considering my options. This recital has opened up several interesting possibilities for me. The producer looked momentarily disconcerted. He was clearly not used to receiving resistance, especially from someone he considered to be at a disadvantage. I understand your caution, but I need to emphasize that our offer is time-limited. Other artists are eager for this opportunity. I'm sure I will, Sophia replied with a polite but firm smile, and I appreciate your interest. I'll be in touch when I've made my decision. As Marco walked away, visibly upset, Oliver approached, bringing with him a distinguished-looking man that Sophia didn't immediately recognize. Sophia, I would like you to meet Enrique Martins, director of the Municipal Conservatory. He was so very impressed with your presentation. The man extended his hand with a warm smile. More than impressed, I'm delighted. Sophia, we're looking for a teacher for our advanced piano class, someone who combines impeccable technique with artistic sensitivity. After what I've heard today, I'd be very interested in discussing this possibility with you. The offer took Sophia completely by surprise. Teaching at the Municipal Conservatory, the very place where she had studied, where her ambitions had first blossomed, represented a kind of homecoming she had never imagined possible. That's unexpected. He managed to reply, I'd love to talk more about it. Excellent, here's my card. Can we meet for coffee next week? When the director walked away, Sophia turned to Oliver, still dazed from the night's events. You knew about that? Oliver smiled, that smile she now knew so well, warm, sincere, but with a hint of mischief. I may have mentioned your name when I heard they were looking for someone. But the credit is all yours, Sophia. You won them over with your talent, not my recommendation. Thank you, she whispered, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for his practical support, but for the unwavering faith he had shown in her abilities, for everything. Oliver's response was silent, just a look that said more than words could express, a look that promised a future where they would explore together not just music, but all the chords and melodies that make up a shared life. When the evening finally came to an end and the last guests had left, Sophia found herself again in front of the piano, alone with Oliver and Elias. The boy had fallen asleep in a nearby armchair, exhausted from the excitement of the evening. So, Oliver said, sitting down beside her on the piano bench, what are you going to do? Marco, the conservatory. So many possibilities all of a sudden. Sophia played a few soft notes almost absently as she considered the question. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to explore what it would be like to work with Lena on the Paths project, despite Marco's dubious intentions. Another part of me is drawn to the idea of teaching at the conservatory, of helping other young pianists find their way. And what does your heart say? The question was simple, but Sophia felt its weight. For so many years, she had silenced the answers of her heart, following only the dictates of necessity and survival. My heart tells me that no matter what career path I choose, there is one thing I know for sure. Her hands found his on the keys. I want you and Elias to be a part of my life, no matter what. Oliver's smile lit up his entire face. That's music to my ears. In that moment, with Elias sleeping peacefully just a few feet away, the magnificent Piano silent before them, and the infinite possibilities of the future unfolding like a score yet unwritten, Sophia felt a peace she had sought her entire adult life. The path ahead would not be without challenges. There were professional decisions to make, relationships to navigate, a newfound understanding with her mother to cultivate. But for the first time, she would face these challenges not from fear or insecurity, but from the certainty of her own worth and the strength she had found in reconnecting with her deepest essence. As his own composition had demonstrated, every new beginning carries echoes of the past, but also promises of harmonies yet undiscovered, just waiting for the fingers brave enough to touch them. 6 months had passed since the recital at the Andreas Draco Gallery, and Sophia Rossi's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The grand hall of the Teatro Municipal buzzed with anticipation as the last spectators found their seats. With a capacity of almost 2,500 people, the theatre was completely packed on that special night, the official premiere of the project Percursos, Novos Caminos da Música Clásica, Paths, New Paths in Classical Music. Backstage, Sophia adjusted the silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Elias and Oliver the morning before, engraved with a small musical note and the date of the performance. Her elegant black dress was a contrast to the nervousness she felt, though it was a different kind of nervousness than the one she had experienced at the gallery recital. It was a productive anxiety, a fluttering in her stomach that fueled her, concentration rather than sapping it. 5 minutes, a production assistant announced, walking quickly past the dressing room Sophia shared with Lena Novak and 2 other pianists on the project. "Ready to shine?" Lena asked, adjusting her ruby earrings in the mirror. Over the past few months, their relationship had evolved from a historical competitiveness to an unexpected partnership built on mutual respect and an understanding of the struggles they had both faced, even though they were on opposite sides of the musical success spectrum. "As ready as I can be," Sophia replied with a nervous smile. The decision to participate in the Percursos project had not been easy. After the recital, Sophia was faced with choices that seemed equally tempting. The invitation to teach at the Municipal Conservatory, the possibility of pursuing a solo career with the support of new contacts in the industry, and the proposal from Marco and Lena. What finally convinced her was a frank conversation with Marco Armani, brokered by Oliver, where all the terms of the contract were meticulously reviewed to ensure that Sophia would retain creative control over her compositions and performances. Furthermore, the opportunity to collaborate with other pianists who, like her, had taken unconventional paths represented the kind of artistic community she had always longed for. "I've never seen Marco so willing to renegotiate a contract," Lena had once commented, impressed by the firmness and clarity with which Sophia had defended her interests. "You really intimidated him." The truth was that Sophia was no longer that young pianist, desperate for validation, willing to accept any condition to realize her dream. Now she was negotiating from a position of strength, not just because of Oliver's influence, which certainly weighed heavily, but because of her newfound confidence in her own worth as an artist. Surprisingly, it was Marco himself who suggested that she could combine the Percursos project with a 2-day visiting professorship at the conservatory. What initially seemed like an unexpectedly generous gesture on his part turned out, as Sophia soon discovered, to be a strategy to strengthen the credibility of the project in the eyes of traditional critics, who are always suspicious of initiatives with commercial appeal. "1 minute." The assistant's voice echoed through the hallway again. Lena squeezed Sophia's hand briefly. "Let's show them what real music is." On the main stage, the lights gradually dimmed, and the audience's buzz gave way to an expectant hush. Sophia, from the wings, could feel the energy of the audience, even though she couldn't see them completely. She knew that in the front row were Oliver and Elias, both dressed in their most elegant suits for the occasion. A few seats away, their mother, Mrs. Jensen, was probably fiddling nervously with the concert program in her wrinkled hands. His relationship with his mother had improved considerably in the last few months. It wasn't perfect. Decades of misunderstanding didn't just disappear overnight, but they had found a new balance, sustained by their mutual willingness to look beyond old hurts. Jensen had even accepted an invitation to dinner at the Müller mansion on a few occasions, where, to everyone's surprise, he had developed an unexpected rapport with Elias, telling him stories of the simple neighborhood where Sophia had grown. Marco Armani appeared on the center of the stage, elegant in his Italian suit, receiving polite applause from the audience. With his usual eloquence, he presented the concept of the Percursos project, speaking about the importance of rediscovering authenticity in contemporary classical music, of valuing non-linear trajectories and distinct voices. Our first artist, tonight, he announced with calculated pomp, perfectly represents this journey of rediscovery. After 15 years away from the stage, she now returns with an artistic maturity that only real life could provide. With you, Sophia Rossi. As she walked to the center of the stage, Sophia felt a strange calm replace her earlier nervousness. The imposing Steinway that awaited her no longer seemed like an intimidating challenge, but an old friend ready for an intimate conversation. Her performance would begin with a performance of a classical piece, Liszt's Sonata in B minor, a monumental work that demanded both impeccable technique and profound expressiveness. It was a bold choice to open the concert, but Sophia knew she needed to immediately establish her authority as a serious performer, not just a human curiosity with a moving story. As she sat down at the piano, she allowed herself a brief moment to spot Oliver and Elias in the audience. The businessman smiled with that mixture of pride and love that always strengthened her, while the boy gave a discreet thumbs up. Ahead, she saw his mother, sitting stiffly but with an expression of attentive expectation. The opening chords of the sonata reverberated through the theater with an intensity that surprised even the most seasoned critics present. There was an almost orchestral quality to the way Sophia approached the piece, not only executing the notes with precision, but evoking textures and sonic colors that transcended the physical limitations of the instrument. As the music progressed, through its many contrasting sections, at times stormy and dramatic, at times lyrical and contemplative, Sophia felt increasingly connected not only to the instrument, but to every person in the audience. It was as if each note, each musical phrase established a direct channel of emotional communication that dispensed with words. As the final chords of the sonata dissolved into the reverent silence of the theater, there was a moment of collective suspension, as if the audience needed a few seconds to return to reality after their musical journey. Then the applause began. Not polite or restrained, but enthusiastic, genuine, some spectators already on their feet before Sophia had even risen to thank them. The second part of his presentation would consist of 3 original compositions, developed especially for the Percursos project. The first, entitled Lembranzas em Azul Menor, was a nostalgic piece inspired by the newly reconciled memories with his mother. The second, Elias em Movimento, a lighter and more playful composition that reflected the energy and curiosity of the boy who had brought music back into his life. And finally, Novos Horizontes, a more complex and ambitious piece that represented his vision of the future. It was during this last composition that the most significant moment of the evening occurred. Sophia had created a space for improvisation. In the center of the piece, a section where, with each performance, she could express the emotional state of that particular moment. That night, the improvisation flowed with an almost transcendental intensity, charged with all the emotions that had marked her journey: the pain of abandonment, the resignation of silent years, the gradual rebirth, and finally, the triumphant reunion with her deepest essence. Sharp-eyed critics would later note how this improvised section had subtly incorporated motifs by Chopin, the composer Sophia had been playing the day Elias had discovered her at the piano, interwoven with echoes of an old lullaby her father used to sing. It was a musical fabric that told her story without words, accessible even to those who were unfamiliar with the details of her life. At the end of his performance, the ovation was instantaneous and overwhelming. The municipal theatre, with all its tradition and solemnity, had rarely witnessed such a visceral reaction to a classical music concert. People wept openly, others applauded until their hands hurt, and many simply remained standing as if paralyzed by the experience. When the applause finally began to die down, Marco announced a special surprise, an unscheduled encore, in which Sophia would be accompanied by a special guest. To the amazement and delight of the audience, Elias took the stage, visibly nervous but determined, and sat down next to his teacher. Together, they performed a simplified arrangement of Beethoven's For Elisa, the first piece Sophia had taught the boy. The performance lacked the technical complexity of the previous works, but carried a tenderness and authenticity that perfectly captured the essence of the Percursos project. Backstage, after the final thanks, Sophia was greeted by a crowd of admirers, critics eager for an exclusive statement, fellow musicians with collaboration proposals, record company representatives with tempting offers. Amid the confusion of voices and faces, however, she was reaching out to just 3 people. He found them in his dressing room, Oliver, Elias, and Donna Jensen, all with expressions that mixed pride, admiration, and that special kind of love that transcends words. "You were amazing," Elias exclaimed, still vibrant despite the late hour. "We were amazing," Sophia corrected, hugging him affectionately. "My favorite duet partner." Jensen, less expansive but visibly moved, just held her daughter's hands for a moment. "Your father would be dancing with joy wherever he is." As for Oliver, the look in his eyes said it all. It had been his support, his unwavering faith, that had allowed Sophia to rediscover her own strength. It wasn't a matter of rescue, she had never needed saving, but of recognition, of seeing value where others, including herself, sometimes failed to see it. Marco Armani entered the dressing room, elated with the success of the evening. "Sophia, the critics are ecstatic. We already have invitations for performances in São Paulo, Buenos Aires, and possibly a European tour in the next semester. The Percursos project has just become the most talked about topic in the world of national classical music." Sophia smiled, accepting the praise and excitement, but her gaze met Lena's, who was watching from the doorway with a knowing smile. They both knew that the true value of that night lay beyond the contracts, the tours, or even the applause. It lay in the restored authenticity, in the music that had finally returned to being an end in itself, not a means to external validation. "We need to celebrate," Marco declared. "I've booked the Copacabana Palace Ballroom for a special reception. All the critics and important figures will be there." "I appreciate the invitation," Sophia replied kindly, "but I have other plans for tonight." The producer looked momentarily disconcerted, but Lena skillfully intervened. "Don't worry, Marco, I will represent the team with all the necessary elegance. Sophia deserves a more intimate celebration after such a personal performance." When they finally left the theatre, it was already past midnight. The night breeze enveloped them as they walked to Oliver's car, parked nearby. Elias, exhausted but happy, had fallen asleep in the back seat before they even reached the main avenue. "Where to now?" Oliver asked, looking at Sophia with that mixture of affection and admiration that never failed to warm her insides. "Home," she replied simply, knowing that for the first time in many years the word carried its fullest meaning. On the way, they passed Copacabana Beach, its sands silvery under the moonlight, the ocean eternally murmuring its own primordial concert. Sophia asked them to stop for a moment. Leaving Elias sleeping in the car under the care of Mrs. Jensen, who had insisted on accompanying them, Sophia and Oliver walked across the sand, barefoot, their hands naturally finding each other in the dark. "So," he began, breaking the contemplative silence, "how does it feel to be officially hailed as the great comeback of the year in the classical music world?" Sophia laughed softly. "Honestly, I feel like I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not just on stage, but in every aspect of my life." Oliver stopped, turning to face her in the silvery moonlight. "Do you know what I admired most about your performance today? It wasn't your flawless technique, or even the emotion you conveyed. It was seeing someone completely at peace with their own journey, the highs, the lows, the detours. You turned it all into something beautiful." Sophia felt unshed tears dance in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. without Elias. You gave me back something I didn't even know I had lost. Your music, my courage, she corrected softly. Oliver held her face in his hands with an almost religious reverence. Sophia Rossi, you are the most extraordinary composition I have ever encountered in this life. Complex, profound, surprising, and infinitely beautiful. And if you will allow me, I would like to spend the rest of my days learning every note, every accord, every silence that makes up who you are. Under the starry sky of the city, with the ocean as witness and the music still echoing in their souls, they sealed that promise with a kiss that carried echoes of the past and all the harmonies of the future. 3 months later, the Müller mansion would host an intimate ceremony where Sophia and Oliver would exchange vows under a canopy of white flowers, with Elias proudly carrying the rings. Mrs. Jensen, seated in the front row, would discreetly wipe away stubborn tears, while Lena Novak at the piano would play a piece specially composed for the occasion. The Percursos project would become a landmark in the renewal of local classical music, with Sophia eventually taking over as its artistic director, while maintaining her classes at the conservatory and developing new talents. Marco, ever the pragmatist, would take advantage of the success to expand his musical empire, albeit with a newfound appreciation for the artistic authenticity that Sophia represented. But that night on the beach, all of that was still on the E. Horizon, promises, possibilities, movements in a symphony still in the making. What mattered was the present. Two people who had found in each other not just love but a deep mutual recognition. A little boy who slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that his family, though unconventional, was complete. And a woman who finally understood that her most powerful music was the one born not from the desire to please others, but from the courage to be truly herself. In life, as in music, sometimes you have to wade through painful dissonances to find harmonious resolutions. Sophia understood this. Every note of her existence, the joys and sorrows, the successes and failures, the years of silence and the moments of glory, was an essential part of the grand composition. And now, finally, she was ready to play the next movements with confidence. Grace and that authenticity that, in the end, was the only thing that really mattered.